Hello everybody.
Hi.
My name's Owen.
I'm Lawton.
And we are here to bring you episode 2 of the GS E&C English podcast. Okay. Today we have a great lesson for you about the economy, specifically related to construction in Korea. Okay, so how are we going to do that today?
Right, so we brought in a news article from Arirang News, which we are going to play for you. And as you listen, we have some comprehension questions that we would like you to listen for, just like last week.
Okay.
So our first question today is going to be, what does Korea rely on for growth? What does Korea rely on for growth? All right.
Okay.
So number 2, what did the government say they would do? What did the government say they would do? And finally, number 3, what do some specialists predict will happen in the next year? What do some specialists predict will happen in the next year? Okay, those are our 3 questions.
Okay, great. So listen very carefully and see if you can pick up the answers to those questions.
Now, data show Korea's economy may be too dependent on the construction sector. According to the OECD, Korea is the only economy growing at more than 2% a year that relies on construction for more than half of its growth. Comparing second quarter GDP figures, the international organization said Seoul's investment in the construction sector contributed 1.7 percentage points toward its growth of 3.2%. With the government announcing measures to cool the property market earlier this month, experts say a sharp dip in construction investment is inevitable next year and that the government needs to mobilize all policy measures to fill the gap with other business investments.
Okay, so thank you very much to Arirang News for providing that news report there. So before we listened to that, you gave us 3 questions.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
What were they?
Yeah, so our 3 comprehension questions, let's go over those just briefly together. So the first question was, what does Korea rely on for growth? What does Korea rely on for growth? What was the answer to that one, Owen?
Lucky for us, it's the construction sector.
That's right,
okay, so Korea relies on the construction sector for growth.
That's right, that's right.
According to this news article. Okay, so...
Question number 2 was, what did the government say they would do? What did the government say they would do? What's the answer to that?
They said they would attempt to slow down house price increases in the next year.
Right.
Attempt to slow house price increases in the next year.
That's right. And then number 3, our third question, what do some specialists predict will happen in the next year? Okay, what was that one?
They predict that construction investments will decrease.
That's right.
In Korea.
That's
okay.
Right. Guess that means we're going to have to be thinking globally.
Yeah, indeed. All right, so hopefully you got all those questions correct. Now let's have a look at some of the key expressions and vocabulary that we picked up from that article.
Let's take a look at those.
Okay. Okay, so today we have 3 key expressions which you can use almost every day in business and construction. Okay, so these are all in the news article there. What is our first expression?
Our first expression today is dependent on. And this came up in the dialogue where it said Korea's economy may be too dependent on the construction sector.
Right.
So what does dependent on mean?
Dependent on means relying on someone or something to be able to continue to exist or make progress. So it just means to be reliant on something or someone else. In construction, the work you do is always dependent on previous work. So what's a good expression?
Yeah, so specifically we could say something like the architecture work is dependent on the civil work, or the architecture work is dependent on the civil work being completed on time, something like that.
Exactly. All right, so yeah. Okay, great. So our second expression is?
Our second expression is inevitable. Inevitable, this is a very common word. In the dialogue, it said a sharp dip in the construction investment is inevitable next year. So what does inevitable mean?
Inevitable basically means certain to happen.
Right.
Something that is definitely going to happen. It is inevitable that the sun will rise tomorrow. Okay, but what's a business or construction example we could use?
Right, so related to business or economics, we could say that it is inevitable that the stock market will rise in the long term. Okay, so in the short term, obviously, it's not inevitable, but in the long term, it is inevitable that the stock market will rise.
Yes, indeed. We would hope.
We hope.
Right. Okay, and our last one is...
Our last word today is mobilize.
Mm-hmm.
Mobilize. This is a word that a lot of you may be familiar with already.
Mm-hmm.
In the dialogue, it said the government needs to mobilize all policy measures to fill the gap with other business investments. So what does mobilize mean, Owen?
To mobilize means to organize or prepare something. Could be a group of people or an item for a specific purpose. So you mobilize a group of people, you mobilize a policy measure in this case. What's another example you could use?
Yeah, so the word mobilize is actually also used a lot related to politics. So we could say something like the candidate phoned or the candidate called thousands of people to mobilize support for her campaign.
Mobilize support.
Yeah, mobilize support for her campaign.
Okay. So those are three words we've given you there, or expressions: dependent on, inevitable, and mobilize. Okay? Not the easiest ones, but hopefully you understood those. And now let's move on and see two idiomatic expressions, which we heard in the dialogue.
Let's do it.
Okay, so two idiomatic expressions which we heard in the news article there. Number one is
sharp dip. So, for example, the economy experienced a sharp dip recently. So what does sharp dip mean, Owen?
Sharp dip, you can visualize it. A sharp dip is a quick fall, a sudden decrease.
Right, a sudden decrease, exactly right.
Not something you want to see or see when thinking about the stocks or the stock market. All right, so a sharp dip. Our second expression is?
Right, so our second expression is to cool something. So for example, to cool the market or to cool the housing market. So what does that mean?
To cool the housing market. This is an expression we have heard a lot in the news lately. To cool means to slow down, to stop something growing so quickly. So we want to cool the housing market. That's something the government wants to do because houses are getting too expensive in Seoul.
Exactly right.
Okay. All right, so those are our two idiomatic expressions. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, everybody, that's all the time we have for today. I hope, again, you found that very interesting and informative. So, as always, if you can find the worksheet and the script on the EIP system where you found this video. So make sure you download those, go through the script, go through the worksheet in your free time, and make sure you become familiar with these expressions we've learned today.
That's right. And as always, we would like to encourage you to take a look at the other English offerings that we have here at GS, the BC courses, the BS courses, EPC Site English, contract letters, as well as the phone English course. Those can all really help you to improve your English level.
That's exactly right. Okay, so as always, let's be passionate about learning English and make 2019 a great year for your English studies. Okay,
We'll
bye-bye,
see you next
everybody.
time. Bye-bye.